The sound of laughter should have filled Maple Grove that sunny afternoon. The kind of laughter that bounces off neatly trimmed hedges and echoes through quiet suburban streets. Instead, what pierced the calm air was a sharp, commanding voice. "She doesn't belong here. Call the cops." The words belonged to Jane Mitchell, a woman whose presence loomed larger than her modest two-story house across the street. Her tone was cold, absolute, as if she alone decided who fit the neighborhood mold and who didn't. Neighbors peeked through curtains, pretending not to notice, but curiosity tugged at them like a magnet. At the center of Jane's furious declaration stood a child. 7-year-old Betty Williams, with her tiny frame balanced on a bright pink bicycle and her worn stuffed unicorn tucked into the basket, froze mid-pedal. Her sneakers, the kind with little lights that flickered each time she moved, blinked nervously in the sunlight. She wasn't breaking anything. She wasn't making noise. She was simply being a child, circling the block, stopping here and there to inspect the world with wide-eyed wonder. But Jane didn't see innocence. What she saw was intrusion. Betty's skin color, the way her braids shimmered in the sun, the fact that she wasn't one of the usual families Jane had grown used to policing with her suspicious gaze. Those details became fuel for Jane's warped perception of danger. The shrill echo of approaching sirens soon joined Jane's voice, slicing through the idyllic image of Maple Grove. What should have been a peaceful day was now unraveling into something ugly, something dangerous. Betty's small hands tightened around her unicorn, her voice cracking into a desperate whisper, "I want my mommy." The scene was set. A bitter woman blinded by prejudice, a frightened child clutching the last reminder of her father, and a community about to watch an ordinary afternoon twist into a lesson none of them would ever forget. 45 minutes earlier, everything had been different. The sun rose golden over Maple Grove, casting warm light on manicured lawns of flower beds that smelled of lavender and roses. It was Betty's first week exploring the new neighborhood her mother had worked so hard to give her. Wearing her favorite purple dress, with sparkly unicorn sneakers flashing beneath her, Betty felt a sense of excitement she couldn't quite put into words. In her backpack, alongside her snack and a book, she carried a magnifying glass her new teacher had given her that morning. To Betty, it was no ordinary tool. It was a portal into hidden worlds. She pedaled her bicycle down the sidewalk, her laughter a melody of curiosity. She stopped at the row of community mailboxes, where something shiny in the mulch caught her eye. Kneeling down, she used her magnifying glass to examine what looked like a treasure stone, sparkles dancing across its smooth surface. She imagined her late father smiling from above, proud of her for remembering how he had once told her, "Every rock has a story if you look close enough." It was a moment of pure innocence, until Jane Mitchell's blinds shifted. From behind her window, Jane watched with narrowed eyes, suspicion darkening her thoughts. For 2 weeks, she had cataloged the Williams family's every move. She knew when Sarah left for work, when Betty came home from school, and how often visitors knocked on their door. To Jane, being divorced, unemployed, and stripped of her sense of purpose, watching others had become her obsession. So when her gaze landed on Betty crouching by the mailbox, Jane didn't see a child discovering beauty. She saw trespass, danger, a chance to exercise control she had lost everywhere else. The sight of a magnifying glass in Betty's hand morphed in her mind into a suspicious device. The shiny rock became contraband, and the child herself, just 7 years old, transformed in Jane's imagination into a threat. By the time Betty looked, "What are you doing?" Jane's voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusatory. Betty startled, nearly dropping the rock in her tiny hands. She looked up, expecting a smile, maybe even curiosity about her discovery. Instead, she found a woman towering above her with narrowed eyes and lips pressed into a thin, angry line. I found a pretty rock," Betty stammered, holding it out as though the sparkle could explain itself. "My daddy taught me to look for treasures. Every rock has a story." Jane didn't glance at the stone. She snatched it from Betty's hand, the girl's fingers lingering on it, as though she were handing over her heart. "This is not your playground," Jane snapped. "You don't belong here. Where do you even live?" Betty's pulse quickened. She was shy, nervous under the scrutiny. "I live on Maple Street. 412, she mumbled, mixing up the numbers in her panic. Jane's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Liar. Children who actually live here know their address. First you dig around our mailboxes. Now you can't even tell the truth. What are you really doing?" Betty's eyes filled with tears. Her sneakers blinked faint red and blue lights with every fidget of her small feet. She clutched her stuffed unicorn tighter, as if it could shield her from Jane's suspicion. "Please," she whispered. "I just wanted to look at the rock." But Jane had already pulled out her phone. She angled it at Betty, pressing record. "Suspicious activity," she muttered, loud enough for neighbors to overhear. "Caught red-handed." Panic fluttered in Betty's chest. She tried to climb on her bicycle, desperate to ride home, but Jane followed, her phone camera trained like a weapon. "You're not leaving," Jane barked. "Not until the police sort this out." Betty's magnifying glass slipped from her backpack, shattering against the pavement. She gasped, kneeling to pick up the shards, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'll clean it up," but Jane only sneered. Other neighbors peeked out, Betty's sobs grew louder, her small shoulders trembling as she tried to scoop the broken glass into her palms. To her, it wasn't just glass. It was a gift from her new teacher, a symbol that she could belong in her new school, a promise that curiosity was something to be celebrated. Now it lay in sharp, jagged pieces like her sense of safety in that moment. Jane stood above her, recording every second with grim satisfaction. "Caught destroying property," she announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "This is what happens when outsiders think they can just come here and do whatever they want." From 2 houses down, Mrs. Chun hesitated at the edge of her garden. The elderly woman's hands clutched her watering can, her instincts telling her to comfort the child, but fear of Jane's infamous temper rooted her in place. Across the street, Mr. Rodriguez removed his baseball cap, frowning as he watched. He had grandchildren Betty's age, and seeing her so afraid twisted his gut. He started forward, but Jane turned sharply, waving him away with the authority of someone who believed the entire block was under her command. "I have this under control," she declared. "This child is dangerous. Don't interfere." Dangerous. The word echoed in Betty's ears, a brand she didn't understand. She wasn't dangerous. She was 7. She was holding a unicorn in one arm and broken glass in the other. Her tears were real, her pleas soft but desperate. "Please, I didn't mean to break it. Please don't be mad." Jane ignored her. With cold precision, she dialed 911. Her voice, suddenly syrupy with false concern, carried calculated lies. "Yes, there's a suspicious black child tampering with mailboxes. She's been destroying property, acting erratically. I don't think she lives here." Betty froze at the word police. In her world, police were heroes, her mother's world. But here, on Maple Street, Jane's lies twisted the meaning. Betty clutched her unicorn tight. The wail of sirens shattered the uneasy silence, echoing off brick walls and pristine driveways. Betty's heart thudded in her chest as she crouched lower, pressing her stuffed unicorn against her face as if it could muffle the terror building inside her. To her young mind, sirens meant someone was in big trouble, and Jane's words had convinced her that someone was her. Jane's face lit with satisfaction. She lowered her phone and crossed her arms, standing triumphantly like a general awaiting reinforcements. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering, unsure of what they were witnessing. Some saw a frightened child. Others, influenced by Jane's certainty, wondered if maybe there was more to the story than met the eye. 3 police cars screeched to a stop, lights flashing in blue and red bursts that painted the street in chaos. Out stepped Officer Jackson, a 15-year veteran, calm but rigid in demeanor. Beside him was Officer Miller, who prided himself on being tough on crime, and finally Officer Thompson, the rookie, still green, her nerves visible in the way her hand hovered near her belt. "Over here," Jane called, waving them down. "This is the child I told you about." Her voice dripped with the confidence of someone who believed her lies had already taken root. The officers approached cautiously. To them, dispatch had described a suspicious juvenile tampering with property, possibly abandoned, possibly coached. Their minds were already primed to see danger. And then they saw her. A tiny girl in a purple dress, sneakers blinking faint light, crouched by broken glass with tears streaking her cheeks. She clutched a stuffed unicorn so tightly it seemed part of her body. Officer Jackson frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. This was the threat? Officer Miller, however, stiffened, his training telling him not to dismiss appearances. And Officer Thompson, the rookie, felt her stomach twist. Nothing about this scene looked like danger, only heartbreak. Officer Jackson crouched slightly, tried to appear less intimidating, but his badge and uniform loomed large in Betty's terrified eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. His voice was meant to soothe, but to Betty, every syllable carried the weight of authority. My name is Betty," she managed between sobs, clutching Star, her unicorn, even tighter. "And where do you live?" Officer Miller pressed, his tone firm, clipped, designed to extract answers quickly. Betty pointed shakily toward her house. "Over there. I live there. 412, no, 421. I think." The numbers tangled in her frightened mind, tumbling out in confusion. Jane jumped in, her voice dripping with triumph. "See? She can't even give her address. That's what I told you. She's lying. She doesn't belong here." Officer Miller exchanged a look with Jackson. To him, the hesitation was suspicious. To Thompson, however, it was painfully obvious what was happening. This was a scared child, not a scheming intruder. She bit her lip, wanting to speak up, but unwilling to undermine her senior partners in front of the crowd. The neighbors whispered louder now. Some, like Mrs. Chun and Mr. Rodriguez, shook their heads in disbelief, recognizing the innocence before them. Others hesitated, swayed by Jane's certainty and the flashing authority of police lights. Betty's tears blurred her vision. She tried to remember her mother's rules. Stay calm, be polite, never argue. But how could she when every adult face around her seemed to shout that she was wrong, that she was dangerous? "Please," she whispered, "I didn't do anything bad. I just found a rock." Her words, so simple, so childlike, fell into the charged silence like fragile glass. Officer Thompson felt her chest tighten. The girl's honesty was undeniable, but Jane was relentless. "Officers, don't let her innocent act fool you. I saw her casing the mailboxes. She destroyed property. You need to take this seriously. The Tentio."
Betty's little voice trembled into the smartwatch, but in her panic she didn't realize the call hadn't gone through. She kept talking to it as though her mother could hear. "Mommy, there's a scary lady. She called the police on me. I didn't do anything wrong, I promise. I just found a rock like Daddy taught me." Each word cracked with desperation, breaking the hearts of the few neighbors who truly listened. Mrs. Chun stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "Officers, please," she said, her accent thick but her meaning clear. "She only... Look at rocks, I see her. She not doing bad thing." Jane spun on her, eyes blazing. "You don't understand what you saw. This child has been acting suspicious for over an hour." "Don't let pity cloud your judgment," Mr. Rodriguez joined in, his voice steady, protective. "No, I saw it too. She was just playing. She's a child, for God's sake, look at her." The crowd grew restless, split between doubt and belief. Officer Jackson rubbed his temple, caught between conflicting testimonies and his training to remain impartial. Officer Miller, however, wrote down notes as though building a case, his face stern. Officer Thompson, standing slightly apart, felt her chest ache. She saw a little girl trembling with fear, clinging to a stuffed toy as though it were her shield. Then came the distant sound again, sirens, closer now. Reinforcements, or simply coincidence? To Betty, it felt like confirmation of her worst fear. The police were coming for her. She pressed Star against her face and whispered, "I'm going to jail. I'll never see Mommy again." Jane smirked, satisfied. To her, this was validation, proof that her complaint was being taken seriously. "Finally," she muttered. "Now we'll get answers." But not everyone shared her satisfaction. Mrs. Chun placed a trembling hand on Betty's shoulder, kneeling beside her. "Little one, you okay?" she whispered gently. Betty looked at her with wide, tearful eyes and whispered back, "I just want my mommy." And somewhere across town, that very mother's phone buzzed with missed calls from dispatch, pulling her toward a truth that would change everything.